Now, I'd like to introduce to you our keynote, How a Lonely Cougar in Los Angeles Inspired the World, with speaker Beth Pratt, who is a lifelong advocate for wildlife and has worked in environmental leadership for over 25 years and in two of the country's largest national parks, Yosemite and Yellowstone. As the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation, Beth leads the hashtag Save LA Cougars campaign to build potentially the largest wildlife crossing in the world. Beth will be sharing with us the story of P22, a lonely cougar who made an extraordinary journey across two major freeways to find a new home in the middle of Los Angeles, which serves as a model for the perfect blend of using storytelling to engage an audience to achieve educational and scientific outcomes. I am now happy to turn it over to Beth for her presentation. Thank you.
Hello, and I am so excited to be here at the California Trails and Greenway Conference. Mostly because I love to hike and I use trails all across the state and the country. So it's great to be talking to so many of you who make that happen for so many people, including myself. I'm also excited to be here to talk with you a little bit about something really important to me in my work, which is mountain lion kittens, connectivity. And I'm going to start off this talk with connectivity, why it's important, a little bit on how it applies to your work, and then getting to a really incredible project that I work on in the Los Angeles area that is working to bring back connectivity to a place where it just does not exist right now. I think a lot of you know this mountain lion called P22, and I'm going to talk a lot about his story and how it applies to people understanding what connectivity is and why it's important for wildlife and for people. But a little bit about me and my cat who wants to be part of this presentation. My name is Beth Pratt, and I am the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation, and I love my work. Before this job, I worked in Yellowstone National Park and in Yosemite for almost a decade. And I make my home right outside Yosemite National Park on the southwest border. I consider it my North Star, and it's sort of part of my two lives. That photo on the left there is I spent every moment I can in the Yosemite high country looking for butterflies and pika, and I'll talk about that. But the sort of second half of my life is I actually advocate and work on urban wildlife projects. And to me, both of them are equally important. But there's no doubt my heart is in the Yosemite area. Here's Mount Kenness in the high country. As soon as that pass opens, I'm up there. You have an incredible amount of wildlife in the high country, from bears to Yosemite toads to butterflies. I've really been getting into alpine butterflies and just that these incredible creatures soar over 12,000 feet when I can barely make it up that high. And I'm going to talk about how connectivity impacts all these critters. Here's a butterfly. You don't often see photos of butterflies on snow at 12,000 feet, but indeed, these are intrepid little critters. And then another animal I study is the pika, which I think we can all agree is one of the most adorable animals on the planet. But this is kind of my day job, which is advocating to improve the dating lives of cougars in the Los Angeles area. If you told me I'd be doing urban wildlife conservation 10 years ago, I probably would have laughed at you. But to me, it is core to what we do. And what I want to ask you during this presentation is to think a little differently about wildlife and wildlands and how animals and people use the landscape. It's really about challenging our own preconceptions. Now, this is a photo of Hayden Valley, one of my favorite places in Yellowstone when I work there. And I think we all think of this as sort of a traditional nature photo, right? This is where wildlife should be. Well, I ask people to think a little more differently these days because we need spaces like Hayden Valley and Yosemite or wildlife refuges. But the number one threat to wildlife worldwide is the loss of habitat. And we also need to reclaim some space. So we don't want to lose any, but we also need to reclaim some space and get more comfortable with sharing spaces that we tend to think of as exclusively human. space, listen, we have plenty in California in some respects. We have a lot. About 40%, I think, is just federally protected land. And then you start adding in state parks and other conservation areas. But it's not enough when we start looking at the science of connectivity. And this is new or newer. When I was coming up in my undergrad in the biology field and working in the environment for most of my years, we used to think that this open space was enough. Okay, we put aside a Yosemite or a Yellowstone or any number of spaces and check the box. Wildlife has their own spot and bam, we've saved them all. Well, science is now telling us it doesn't work. Nature doesn't work without connection. My friend Mary Ellen Hannibal wrote in an incredible book on this, The Spine of the Continent, which I'll talk about. And she talks about even this, this 1,000+ year migration path for pronghorns was being interrupted and disrupted and whittled away to almost nothing because of human interference in many ways. And how people from the oil industry, from ranchers, from conservationists came together to reestablish this. And I really, again, in your work, as I go through this, start thinking about how you can think of connectivity in trail planning or recreation planning. And I'll get to how it can be impactful. So it impacts wildlife in many ways. I mean, first of all, especially for territory needy animals like the mountain lions that I work on in Los Angeles, they have 100 square mile territories. So they have to be able to move and our roads are in the way. I mean, the physical footprint of our roads are enormous. It's about 1% of the total US land area. But what I also want you to think of in terms of roads and trails and other human activity is it extends out from just the physical footprint. It extends out to a larger footprint when you factor in noise and activity and things that will just deter wildlife from using areas, to say nothing of the immediate impacts on a road or a trail. I mean, and these, especially on roads, are enormous. 1 to 2 million crashes just with the big wildlife every year. And then we talk about the property damage. Wildlife is really trying to adapt. I mean, these are some photos from the Los Angeles area where I work. You have, bobcats using culverts, and coyotes are using, downtown LA roads. And this is one of my favorite videos. I actually watched this unfold on Twitter. You had 2 deer actually trying to use the Golden Gate Bridge to get to Marin. They probably heard Marin was, good for organic food. But we can't always rely on cars, obviously, to slow down like this. And although we mostly see the impacts on, the megafauna or the big animals, because it's sadly sometimes what we see either dead on the road, it's also the little guys. And this is a photo of a Western fence lizard trying to cross Mulholland. And I did move it into safety, but it takes an enormous toll on the little things as well. We put in barriers, and barriers can be a number of things, but I think the Mexican border wall, to say nothing of its impact on people, and the injustices there, it's also hugely impactful on wildlife. When you have, animals using the same migration or just travel paths for decades or more, coming across this one year, it can be fatal, as we know, and take out not just individual animals, but entire populations. Also want you to think of connectivity a little differently as well, just even in smaller areas, how impactful it can be if we disrupt it. Right now, or I should say after I finish this talk, Google this tadpoles, the big little migration. It'll change the way you think about tadpoles. And also when you go swimming in any little waterway, what you might be disrupting. It's an incredible little documentary. Also, waterways like oceans. We don't tend to think of those as having barriers, but this is incredible. Check this out. This is animation, and the blue is a whale trying to navigate shipping lanes. So even in our oceans, which we don't think of as having roadways or disruptions, they can be. Human movement itself can be a barrier to connectivity. Turn this. Oops. And then I want you to also think about your own homes or planning for recreation area with fencing or barriers and how wildlife have to navigate it. These can also be really impactful because of connectivity. Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles is doing something really amazing and forward thinking, which is they actually have a wildlife pilot study, and they've been looking at even issuing building permits or regulations around how to remove barriers to connectivity for wildlife, such as how do you site fences or property lines? If they're right up against each other, animals don't have a shot. But if you actually use permeable fencing or spaces in between lots, now you're talking. Animals have a little easier time navigating our human spaces. And again, getting to the work you do, especially trails. We didn't think anything of where we put trails, until this emerging science is showing they actually can be very impactful. Before it was like, throw up a trail, there's plenty of open space around, we won't harm anything. We now know they can. Not all trails, it's situational, and you want to look at the ecosystem, but I think it's a lot more thought that we have to give to biological resiliency to trails than we ever thought. It's not enough that there's just open space around it and we're only taking out a little. For instance, one of the animals I love, and this is up near where I live, is a Sierra newt. And this is a Sierra newt on a trail. And they use trails. I mean, animals like the easy path just like we do. And especially when we site trails and traditional paths where they're moving, they're going to use them. Unfortunately, this is what you get. This is a newt that was run over by a mountain bike. And I'm not knocking mountain biking. I have a mountain bike. I like mountain biking. But, especially the faster speeds we go and the type of movement we're doing, you're going to get impacts like this. And hiking, if you have increase in usage, you're going to get impacts like this as well. So it's not that we can't mountain bike or hike or horseback ride, but maybe in less sensitive areas and reconsidering trail sightings. This is actually a sign I put up hoping that people would take notice and slow down a little bit on the trail. Because, when we start looking at extinction of species, it doesn't just have to be the endangered ones. Population by population, animals can start vanishing from entire areas and ecosystems, even if they're not endangered on a larger scale. Also, another animal, as I told you, I like studying is butterflies, and they use our trails as well. I thought I'd show a little video. These are some checker spots puddling along the Merced River right on the trail. So again, maybe certain times of the year you have a workaround, or if there's really sensitive butterfly habitat, we might close trails because, as we know, we have some butterflies that might go extinct, like the monarch. We are down to 2,000 individuals in this state with the last Western monarch count. And these areas are traveled. Sometimes our trail areas can be traveled for them, or where they are breeding. Or overwintering. And again, just to show you how butterflies use trails, I hope you can see this. It might be a little small. They're using them the same way we are. And again, disrupting a corridor like that with increased traffic or traffic of recreational uses that are faster and take more butterflies out. We know now, the monarch being a cautionary tale, just how quick a population can go from millions to almost on their way out. So again, just some things to think about when citing trails and trail use and things like that. Bruce Thompson has done some incredible work on the impacts of wildlife on trails. And again, I won't read all these, but you can. It basically is saying that, it's not just the immediate use of the trail, but again, the extinction of the impacts. And activities, the louder and faster they are, can impact the wildlife as well. And again, that this is an emerging concern in the scientific literature on trails. So again, just keep these in mind, and I'm happy to send you references to Bruce's work or research because it's really helpful stuff to teach us how to do our jobs better in planning like this. And of course, the last thing I'll leave with is we now know build it and they will come. And I think especially in this age of social media, we can't ignore that overuse not just for wildlife, but for people, is a real growing concern. So we need to make sure in planning trails, we have the resources to manage them, because not only is that going to be a nightmare for people and communities trying to manage these, but also for wildlife and taking out, not, actually the ecosystem you're trying to protect or have people enjoy. So I think let's talk about the solutions to connectivity. And I'm going to focus mainly on the road ones, but of course, there's a whole host of them for trails as well. But the principle is the same. And I think what we have to do is we have to mitigate. It's not always possible. I will say, especially on trails, can't mitigate for everything. And sometimes that's where closures or resiting might be possible. But for roads and places like where we need to absolutely get animals across the road, or, and there's no other options, wildlife corridors, wildlife crossings are something that is really coming to sort of I'd say, into its own. We have decades of science around this now. They are very popular with the public because they work. And the US is catching up. Where you had to see a lot of these in the past was places overseas, like the Netherlands or Belgium. Or if you're on this continent in North America, Banff National Park has really been the gold standard. Many of you might have been up to Banff to see this. But again, the US is catching up now. I just visited some crossings in Colorado. The deer started using these crossings just a couple days after they were finished. And here's a photo of a moose using one of them. The path of the pronghorn, which I mentioned before, you can see the map is showing the length that those pronghorn would travel, only on this one of these pinch points to just be sort of decimated on the road. So here's the solution: get them across the road. There's actually a pretty cool webcam you can check out during pronghorn migration season and watch them go over the crossing. It's pretty cool. Many of you have probably seen the viral video of wildlife using a new crossing in Parley Summit in Utah, and it's pretty impressive to watch the variety of the species go across there. And then up on I-90 in Washington State, near Snoqualmie Pass, there's a series of crossings, and they have some pretty cool footage of elk and wolves and grizzly bears using them. One of the newest crossings I'm about to go visit is a land bridge in Texas, which right now is the country's largest crossing. Of course, we're going to beat it. The one I'm working on, we'll get to that. But still, this is a pretty cool combination of a people and a wildlife crossing, which is fine. Every crossing is different. Some are not appropriate for people and wildlife to share. Some are. But these just shows you, especially for planning like you do, what's possible with our recreation areas to accommodate both in some situations. My favorite wildlife crossing is the Yosemite toad crossing that the U.S. Forest Service put in on a road where toads were crossing and, of course, getting hit and mushed. And these little toads go under the crossing so that they don't get hit by cars. So there's an array of crossings, and I could go into tons of them, for turtle crossings to crabs to, it's pretty cool, the creativity that people come up with to get animals across the roads, because connectivity is key. And here's the one I am working on, the wildlife crossing at Liberty Canyon. I've been working on for almost a decade with some partner teams I'll talk about that have been working on it for longer. And we just released these new visualizations in the fall. Wow, it's just pretty incredible to see this. This crossing will be the largest in the world once built, not because I want it to be the largest. I would gladly build the world's smallest crossing, but we have to go over the 101 freeway, one of the busiest freeways in the world, in the country, if not the world. We get 300 to 400,000 cars a day using this crossing. And you can see that what we're doing with ours, and again, every crossing is situational, is we are reconnecting an ecosystem for all wildlife, for mountain lions most critically, which I'll talk about, but this is going to reconnect an ecosystem for everything. And what we didn't know when we put in the 101 was that we were cutting off the Santa Monica Mountains from the rest of the world, which ecologically was not good and evolutionarily had never happened before. And what we're seeing is isolation. As I'll talk about, it's not just the immediate impacts of animals getting hit either by a mountain bike on a trail or a car on a road. It's the isolation that results as well, which gives these ecosystems, whether they're small little ecosystems or larger regional ones, a lack of resiliency. And that's why we are giving attention to all wildlife, because the same genetic collapse or the lack of genetic diversity that is resulting from creating these islands, that again is most acutely felt with the mountain lions. The National Park Service, who's been doing research in this area for almost 20 years, is seeing in the small stuff as well, lizards, birds. So we know islands, especially the ones we create, just do not give a lot of resiliency, and especially with challenges like climate change and the results like fire and habitat loss and you name it, animals need all the resiliency they can get. So let's talk about the specific mountain lion situation I've alluded to, because this is applicable anywhere. And again, I get you thinking about what animals need more than just habitat, protected habitat. I don't like to show a lot of these photos, but this is the reality. When you talk about the immediate effects of roads, and it is, if a mountain lion meets a car, the car is going to win, sadly enough. And what you have with mountain lions is they are very territory needy. Mountain lions do not share territory. They live alone. And indeed, once they come of age, they have to disperse and find new homes, or else they will be challenged by the dominant male, and it can result in a fight to the death. So mountain lions disperse, and their territories are so large, 100 square miles, 150 square miles, that they have to move a long way to find a new home. And when you are living in the middle of the Los Angeles area and miss the infamous freeways, that is not always all that easy. And you have cats like P32, a beautiful mountain lion who did what a good mountain lion should. He naded across some of our roads to try to find a new home, as you can see on this map, only to meet his demise on the 5. And this was just really sad to watch. We had been tracking this cat since he was a kitten and just couldn't make it across the 5. What this map that the National Park Service produced shows is, I think it just tells the story. And again, you could apply this to anything, a trail system, a housing development. Those colored circles are home ranges. And this map's a little outdated in that some of these mountain lions have passed on, but the theme applies. Those home ranges are defined artificially by the freeways. They are not crossing the freeways. They are also smaller than they should be and a little bit more on top of each other. And it's all because of this lack of connectivity. If you look on the bottom of the screen, you can see the gray 101, and beneath that are mountain lion territories. And you can see they're absolutely not crossing. And what you're seeing is the Santa Monica Mountains have plenty of open space. It's not a lack of open space that is challenging this mountain lion population, is that it's not connected to any other open space. So the mountain lions south of the 101 are inbreeding themselves out of existence. The only dates they can get are their daughters and granddaughters and great-great-granddaughters, because mountain lions from the north of the 101 can't get in. And then the mountain lions south of the 101 can't get out to disperse. So we have a really critical situation here in the Santa Monica Mountains that is a lack of genetic diversity that we also have in many places in Southern California. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife is doing this comprehensive study of mountain lions in the state. It's pretty amazing what they're able to pull together, because it's never been done before. You have studies here and there, but not a comprehensive look. And what they came up with recently was this map that showed 10 genetic sort of subpopulations of mountain lions. And you can see, like where I live in the Sierra, I live right outside Yosemite, got plenty of genetic diversity and a huge range for mountain lions to roam and exchange genetics. But if you go down south, you see those zones get really small and critical. So much so that the California Fish and Game Commission voted last year to advance for final consideration listing of those populations of mountain lions on the state's Endangered Species Act, because this lack of genetic diversity is becoming so critical. And indeed, it's becoming so critical in the Santa Monica Mountains, we are starting to see birth defects in these cats, which was the low bar the National Park Service was predicting, but we didn't want to reach. And how this plays out in mountain lions is kinked tails, one testy descended. And you may ask, well, what's the big deal with a kinked tail, right? I mean, a cat can still live. Well, what this is pointing to actually is sterility, that at some point they may not even be able to breed. We know from a large panther who ran into this exact same situation, and they literally were on the verge of extinction. We also have things that challenge wildlife like mountain lions that connectivity is key with as well, such as wildfires. And I even hesitate to call them wildfires these days, because what we're talking about are human-caused firestorms. Wildlife in California that's native to this state have adaptations to survive fires, but they don't have adaptations to survive continual human-caused firestorms that occur at a rate and in frequency much greater than you would in the natural environment. And this is what you're seeing with the mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains. We lost one cat directly to the wildfires, the Woolsey fire, which of course, like people, they can just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what you saw with this other cat, P64, where you're looking at the burnt paws here, he actually survived the fire, but died 2 weeks later, was found dead 2 weeks later by the National Park Service. And based on his GPS points, it looked like he just couldn't escape the burn zones because of our roadways. So this shows you that there's even more impacts to this lack of connectivity that, we're just learning about. So this is what we're going to solve for in the Santa Monica Mountains. This is the site of where Liberty Canyon will be putting in. And I think there are wildlife crossing projects going on that are in planning all across the state. So I think it's just exciting that California really does want to be a leader in this now. And Liberty is probably going to be the first, definitely the biggest to be constructed. And this map to me really shows the green space we are trying to connect. And it shows you, it whittles down from plenty of open space up top, plenty of open space south of the 101, yet it narrows down to the last 1,600 feet of connected, protected areas north and south of the 101. So we have to fix that, or again, we won't have mountain lions on the landscape short term, and long term, who knows what else will be impacted by this lack of connectivity. So that gets me to the story of P22. And he's our hero and sort of our poster child for the work we're going to be doing. So I started off with sort of what connectivity is and why it's important. But what I'd like to talk a little bit now is sort of how we're doing our work. And it's getting really dark in here. So I am going to switch on my lights so that hopefully gives us a little more light to play with. So P22 lives in Griffith Park, and this is my favorite photo of him because this is what he deals with every day. He has to look out at the lights and roads of LA, which I will venture a guess, not many mountain lions in history have had to do. This is the famous photo of P22 that many of you will be familiar with, that Steve Winter took and appeared in National Geographic and made P22 an international celebrity. I call him the Brad Pitt of the Cougar world. This is some great footage of P22 and shows you just what a beautiful cat he is, living in the second largest city in the country. For the few people that don't know the Brad Pitt of the Cougar World story, P22 grew up in the central Santa Monica Mountains. We do know that from DNA testing. And again, as I told you, mountain lions have to disperse to find new territory. He ended up crossing the 405 and the 101, two roads I don't even want to drive on. Somehow he made it across on foot to find a new home in Los Angeles Griffith Park. This map I like because it really shows the urban living that he is in. He is not on the outskirts of LA, but in the middle of it. And he's in a really small territory for a mountain lion, 8 square miles. But because you have celebrities like Brad Pitt living around Griffith Park with gardens, and you have Forest Lawn Cemetery with plenty of grass, you actually have kind of an artificial population of deer that so far is sustaining him as well. Here's a recent photo of P22. He's getting up there in years. He's 11. He's been in Griffith Park since 2012, but he is still looking pretty good. Real handsome fella. But it's his story that, aside from all the sort of biological superlatives we can assign to him, and it's his story that is really influencing people all over the world and why we're going to get this wildlife crossing built. And I think this is also instructive for the work you do. How do you get people to care when you're managing these recreation areas or building trails? How do you get people to care about the wildlife? How do you get people to care about the natural areas? And the answer is personalize it, personalizing it with wildlife. Almost everybody loves wildlife and connects to it in some way, but you have to connect to it into a meaningful way. And I think the point I like to get across is that science will only take you so far. And I'm a scientist. You need the science. We wouldn't know we needed a wildlife crossing or that the mountain lions weren't in trouble if it wasn't for the science. But public will is just as important. And if the public doesn't care, if there is not an emotional tie to wildlife or natural areas, then all the science in the world can't save us or save these mountain lions. So it's the story of P22 that really took the science, translated it into something that the public could care about, and then there came the will and the funding and everything else that needed to follow to do this landmark conservation project. So hopefully sort of the storytelling as this sort of a second part of my talk will help you with your work and how to get people to care. First of all, anthropomorphizing is fine. Just stop saying it's bad. Okay. I, again, have a biology undergrad. It's fine. We are animals. And of course we share similar traits. It might not be exact, but we want people to relate to wildlife. We want people to build relationships with wildlife. So it's okay to have fun with it. And even some of the anthropomorphizing may have shreds of truth as well. So, how we anthropomorphize is our cougars are looking for dates. And, I think most people realize they're actually not out on dinner dates and can sort of know that there's some biology behind that that's not completely like humans do dates. But we do this by really highlighting P22's story, but letting people connect in ways that are meaningful to them instead of us telling them how they have to connect. So making him very accessible. He has his own Facebook page where you can see photos of his poop, and people talk with him on Facebook and say, hey, I always wondered what your poop looks like. It's pretty great. We have fun with it. We do polls. Who's hotter, Brad or P22? And P22 wins. It's Hollywood. So of course, P22 has some celebrity relationships. There's Jared Leto with a P22 plushie that we use in the campaign. And my own personal favorite actor, Viggo Mortensen, who I got to meet and talk cougars with. Everybody had that sort of meme you got to participate in or, share your last photo before shutdown. This was mine. I hit the jackpot. This was the last event I did before we had shut down in California. And I got to talk with Leela George and Sean Penn, her now husband. They were putting on a benefit for Save LA Cougars and Australian wildlife. And, again, really concerned about the lack of connectivity for these cougars. And then Governor Gavin Newsom in California, a big supporter of this project. I was honored to give him almost an hour tour of the site. His father was very instrumental in mountain lion protections. But I put up this photo because it's instrumental in, again, connecting on those heartstrings. I don't think you could point to another governor in this country that would tweet out, P22 will always have my heart. And I think, again, it's that story of a mountain lion and what he's facing and what this mountain lion represents for his kind, especially in the LA area, is what is really compelling action in getting people to act on this project. But aside from the celebrities, what is really important is getting everybody to relate. And this is where our cardboard cutout has been great. And again, there's a lesson here as well, especially mountain lions. When you're asking people to love them, most people are never going to see them, right? So we use this cutout by proxy to get people to relate. It's proven really popular. But we do a lot of things to get people excited and interested. We have a Cougars of LA trading card set. I have on my P22 holiday sweater, and we have more of the P22 and Cougar clothing line. We just came out with P22 masks last year, and that is actually a photo of P22's face that we used on the mask, so you can dress up as him. The P22 plushie, as I mentioned, has really been popular because you can't hug the real P22, but you can hug that plushie. We did a VR film so people could see connectivity and lack of it from a mountain lion's point of view and visualize what the crossing could look like. We do school murals. We have an incredible artist, Jonathan Martinez, we work with, and he does artwork for the campaign. And we're just starting on our second mural in Watts this past week. And then there are people, what I love is people connect to them in their own ways, such as tattoos on their arms. And kids in school look at P22 as a hero and want to advocate for him. And we do an awful lot of school programs as part of our work. Kids make a mountain lion valentines to ensure that P22 gets a date. We also have hip hop artists who are writing songs. And again, I can't stress enough that it's not about us to tell people how to relate to P22, but it's empowering and highlighting how people connect, right? So when a hip hop artist told me he wrote a song about P22, we gave him a platform. When students do artwork, we give them a platform. And that's what has really made this a movement rather than us as environmentalists telling people how they need to protect these cats. We also bring P22 to areas he might not be. Again, wildlife to Watts. The crossing is nowhere near Watts, neither is P22, but we do annual events in Watts. And here's some scenes from the past 2 years where we actually bring native wildlife there and at least a P22 costume. We declared a P22 Day by the city of LA is officially October 22nd, which is pretty cool. And we have a festival every year where I retrace P22's route to Griffith Park or approximate route to kick off the festival. These are posters from the past 2 years. And again, we really make it fun and feature a different theme. And students, again, are given front and center. They get to highlight on stage, either dances they made about wildlife or plays. And then you have students who study wildlife crossings and connectivity, and they showcase those at the festival. It's pretty cool. Last year, like everybody else, and like you are at this conference here, we had to go virtual. So we worked with these really amazing video game developers who really got how to capture connectivity in sort of games and interaction, and created this festival interface, the Wildlife Wonderland, which is pretty cool. I'm going to show you a video of this. See if I can get it to work here. To just give you a flavor of what we did to really capture people's imaginations here and get them virtually to sort of interact around connectivity and coexistence, since we couldn't do it in person. Ooh. Technical difficulties here. There we go. So I hope you like that. And I think it gave you little glimpses of what the virtual world was we created. It is still up, p22wonderland.org. You can go in and check out the exhibits and the games and the performances. It's just some of the live stuff's not there. Governor Gavin Newsom gave an address at this at our festival, our virtual festival, and the Black Pumas. We had them first before the inauguration and before the Grammys. They're an incredible band, and they did a special set for P22, which was pretty cool. So, I show you all those fun things in the storytelling, but it has an impact, and it's enabling us to get our job done. And I think that's what I sort of want to finish with, is we're actually going to be building the world's largest wildlife crossing because of the creative approach we have taken. All this storytelling, P22 and the crossing have over 1 billion media impressions worldwide. So this storytelling approach really works. I got the receipts, I can tell you. And I'll also tell you, my own organization, when I first started working on this campaign, was very skeptical about the approach and what we were doing. And luckily I had a boss at the time who said, just keep going. And it's really shown that you can make a difference. It's really outside how we've traditionally done our work, I know, in the environmental field, but it's working. And it's creating a movement. And I think this is the other thing to really point out. Again, when I talk about the receipts, right? Living with a mountain lion, these are admittedly predators that can be dangerous, but we have created a movement of people willing, not only just willing to live with mountain lions and other wildlife in an urban area, but actively advocating for them. And nowhere was this more evident that this was working when P22 decided to munch on one of the, admittedly most adorable animals in the world, which is a koala. The LA Zoo is in Griffith Park. So P22 just thought the koala was kind of a raccoon. And I never thought in my conservation career I'd be getting have to issue a statement about a mountain lion eating a koala in Los Angeles, right? Those two are separated by oceans. But it was really interesting. There was a couple of cries like, oh, see, P22 is too dangerous, but nope. Oh my God, people squarely came down on P22's side. And even the zoo apologized and said our fences weren't big enough and vowed to do better. I think in any other state in the country, P22 would probably have been shot or removed probably long before the koala incident, but definitely at this point. But the zoo itself and all of the Los Angeles area came down on P22's side, which I think is a great statement on coexisting with wildlife and coming down on the side of native wildlife. I always like to get in a bit about safety and risk with mountain lions when I'm talking about them, because mountain lions live among us. They always have. I will say there's a lot of talk, is there more mountain lions? I don't think so. There's never been a statewide count. So if anybody tells you they're increasing, there's no data to support that. But we have social media now, we have doorbell cameras, we have wildlife cameras. And so it's just that we're seeing them more where they were because of our new technology and tools. It's also really important to recognize that mountain lions are so low risk. They're almost no risk. It's never zero risk. Wildlife can be unpredictable. They're wild animals. Even ticks can kill you, right? But it's almost nothing. In a state of 100 million people in the last 20 years, we've had less than 20 attacks on people from mountain lions, and only 6 of those were deaths. Now, we didn't want any 6 of those to happen, and I don't want to reduce those 6 people to statistics. But what I just ask people to do is put the risk in perspective. We take risks every day with things we do, and we're okay with it, such as getting into our car. We're almost between 3,000 and 4,000 people a year just in California die on our roadways. So if we're okay getting in a car with those odds, mountain lions should not even be a worry for us at this point. And there are obviously things we can do safely to minimize that risk as well. And if anybody wants information on how to coexist with mountain lions and keep yourself and your pets and your livestock safe, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to give you some resources. But what all this is doing, again, this movement building, this willingness and desire to coexist with mountain lions, is getting this bridge built. So let me just give, for the end here, an update on the wildlife crossing. When I first started working on this project in 2012, it was an idea and there was no funding attached to it. We didn't even know if we could do it. We didn't know if it was even feasible to build it. We are now in final design and engineering. We will have blueprints in August. And if we stay on track with fundraising, we'll break ground in November. It is amazing. We've raised 18 million and counting, and we're getting there. It's amazing what we're able to do. And I got to give a shout out to our partners here, the Liberty Wildlife Corridor Partnership. It takes a village, but these are the 5 core members making this happen. One is the National Park Service. Again, the science. We wouldn't even know we needed a crossing if it wasn't for them. Caltrans, it's their highway, right? But they're like, we'll do it. Just get us the money. The Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains, that brings an incredible amount of resource to the region about landscape restoration. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, who had the incredible foresight to preserve the land on both sides of the freeway, which we wouldn't even be able to build a crossing if we didn't have protected lands. And then the National Wildlife Federation, my group, who was one of the last partners to enter. And we bring the advocacy and education, and of course, took responsibility for the fundraising for this project. As of March 11th, 2021, I should have updated this, but it's pretty close. We've raised $18 million and counting. And it seems like a big gap to go if we're going to break ground, but we're sort of in this home stretch in fundraising. And our asks these days are in the $10 and $30 million range. So that gap gets closed pretty quickly. Along with, we have been in talks with donors for a long time who either can't or have policies against giving until blueprints are produced. So we're quickly approaching that milestone. 18 million raised. It's just amazing to see that, which is pretty incredible for me, having been working on it for so long. So for me, what's cool is we're getting closer. Like, I'm sitting in design meetings and watching this design progress. We're talking about sound walls and types of concrete, and so much so we're betting on which kitten's going to use this first once it's built. And here's another little taste of kittens I know we all love. Oop, we can get the technology down here. Oh, yeah, no great hardship working on this project with kittens as cute as these. But really, one of these kittens could be the first to use this crossing, which is pretty cool. For some reason, one of my slides was out of order, but I do want to end with this video because I talked a lot about building a crossing. But I also talked about the movement we're building, and it's really important to me to be very inclusive in that movement. And I talked about how we need to empower voices, not tell people they have to connect in their own way. To me, access to wildlife is a right. And we have to ensure that that happens in every community. When I was growing up, it's like you had to go to a Yosemite for, see wildlife. And that was the only wildlife we should recognize. We now know that is just absolute nonsense. And we have to connect people to wildlife where they're at and not put a premium just in national parks. Now, I love national parks and we need to keep preserving open space like this, but it is our duty as environmentalists or trail planners or whatever you're doing to ensure that people have connections to wildlife in their places. That is really key to the future of wildlife, but for people, because that connection, it's something in us that is essential. When I was growing up and in second grade and had boy problems or got a bad grade, I'd go connect in the little woods I had with the squirrels and frogs. And that brought me joy and brought me comfort and a way to be resilient and cope with life. Some of the kids we work with have problems I can't even identify with. Schools that we work with, one of them, 30% of the students' parents are undocumented. They go home sometimes not knowing if their parents are going to be there because they've been deported. So you can imagine the stresses some of these kids face that, again, they have the right to access to nature and wildlife. And that's one of the things I'm proudest of this campaign and the work we're doing, is it's not just about a crossing, it's about helping to facilitate these connections. And this video to me is just as much success as getting a wildlife crossing built. This is a video of second graders at one of the P22 Day festivals. And listen to what the little boy has to say about his connection to P22. He's reading a letter that he wrote to P22.
Feel happy living. My letter to P22 is, Dear P22, I know that you have been poisoned by rat poison. You should always try to wash your food, not always eat dead things. I don't think that the tracking device will hurt you. It will help you stay safe. I feel bad for you. I know how it feels to be lonely, sad, and scared. I've been there before. I hope you have a mate to be happy and peace and love. P22. How did it feel like to be in Santa Monica Mountains? How about in Griffith Park? Did you have a mate in Santa Monica Mountains? How lonely do you feel? Love, Rogelio Tunaz. Thank you.
When that little boy says, I know how sad and lonely you feel, I've been there before, wow, that is the type of connections we need to be facilitating. So what I want to end with is, when you think about connectivity in your own work, think about connecting natural spaces for people with trails and other things, but also think about connecting people to wildlife and nature and the areas that you're putting these places that they can recreate, because that is just as important to the work. As I said, the wildlife crossing we're trying to build, and here you see National Geographic has named us the #1 thing to look forward to in 2021. No pressure there. That's important to me, but it's also facilitating connections in the grander sense of people to nature and people to wildlife that has to be embedded in our work as well, or else we just won't have these wild places for the future. So thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure to speak to you. This is my contact information, and it's too bad we can't be together in person or head out after the talk and chat more about these topics. But please reach out. My cell number's there, my email's there. I'm happy to answer questions, happy to share tips, happy to talk with you about anything that I brought up in my presentation and provide you with data or reports or whatever it is you need. Again, thank you for what you do. I am someone who uses your trails all over the state, and really much appreciate how you are stewarding our natural areas for people and for wildlife. Thank you.